If all things were created equal, who would you rather have on a long-term deal? Michael Conforto or Brandon Nimmo? With some of the recent reports linking the Mets back to Conforto on today's show, I'm going to discuss if it makes more sense to sign Michael Conforto now, keep both Nimmo and Conforto for the 2022 season, and then let the more injury-prone player walk in free agency. Get to all of that on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans who are watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. I'm also the managing editor for JustBaseball.com, so you can find some of my writing there. And one of my most recent pieces that's actually going to go up today on Wednesday is an article where I discuss Michael Conforto and a reunion with the New York Mets. Talking about this Conforto back to the Mets topic is something that, we've broached throughout the offseason, and I have been operating under the belief that Michael Conforto's days with the Mets are long gone ever since the end of the season, because if you watch that last game played at Citi Field, it certainly felt like the end of Conforto's career with the Mets. You had the interview before the game with Steve Gelbs where he talked about the emotions heading into the ballpark, how he had, a tough time sleeping before that game. And then you get that shoestring catch in the bottom of the ninth inning of a blowout game where Conforto gets an ovation and he's on the field a little bit overwhelmed. You see him in the dugout, with his teammates. And it was just one of those moments where you felt like, all right, that was the hat tip. He's going to go be a star somewhere else. The Mets are going to move on because he's a free agent. They extended him the qualifying offer. He declined it. I do also want to note actually about that game. That's a high pressure situation for Michael Conforto. Sure, it was a meaningless regular season game, but the stakes were high for him. And in that game, he went 3 for 5. So any notion that this guy isn't a clutch hitter or he can't rise to the big moments, to me, I think that comes from fans that focus a little bit on some of those shortcomings in a sport where players fail a lot and aren't really looking at the big picture of what this guy has been throughout his Mets career, because he's been a very good player. With all that being said, I still thought, okay, he's done. There's no way he's coming back to the Mets. We see as the offseason plays out, that idea only gets confirmed as the Mets' first big moves after Billy Upper gets hired are to sign Mark Canha and Starling Marte, two players that effectively replace and upgrade over Conforto, with Marte being a better player and with Canha just giving you better depth overall in the outfield. So why would they even broach this idea? Why are we back to talking about Michael Conforto? Well, the universal DH. That is the big reason. Pat Ragazzo, as I mentioned on yesterday's show, I believe, he had a report, I think it was over the weekend, where he still said the two most realistic free agent bats the Mets could target, according to an industry source, was Chris Bryant or Michael Conforto, because they don't have a qualifying offer attached. Now, the one thing about signing Conforto compared to Bryant is you are set to get that comp pick, which is why I still think that this is an unlikely reunion. But the more I thought about it today, the more I actually think this is the best big picture move for the New York Mets, because Michael Conforto actually fits into that outfield long term a lot better, in my opinion, than Brandon Nimmo does, because Nimmo carries a much greater injury risk than Michael Conforto. So if you look at it under that context, maybe this does make sense. And also, when it comes to the 2022 Mets, signing Michael Conforto gives you a lot of options to play with. Mark Canha suddenly becomes the DH slash fourth outfielder. He can play all over. He can spare Marte, Nimmo, and Conforto out there, so everyone can get some time as the DH, get off their legs a bit. He could spare Pete Alonso at first base. That then really pushes Dominic Smith down the depth chart, JD Davis down the depth chart, Robinson Cano down the depth chart, and you could see any of those players moved before the offseason. With Cano, it would just be a cut if he shows up to camp, and you just didn't think there was anything left there. With Davis and Dom, it would be trading them, but all of those pieces become more flexible. You could also say the same thing when it comes to a Jeff McNeil, although your infield depth would take a massive hit if the Mets were to trade Jeff McNeil. At the same time, though, you just look at the team as a whole and the lineup as a whole, and it's a lot deeper with Conforto winning. Conforto brings something that Canna, Marte, and Nimmo do not. Canna, to a certain extent, does have some pop, Marte as well, but Michael Conforto can hit 30 home runs. None of those guys I would project to do that. So I look at this addition, and it makes more sense on paper than I would have given it credit on first glimpse, because you do have that flexibility to move guys around. And also, when you're talking about Marte and Canna, who are a little bit older than Conforto, they just played their age 32 seasons, if I'm not mistaken. So they'll be 33. There is a chance for injury there. And then Brandon Nimmo, who's always an injury risk. Now you have great insurance. So I think that there is some merit to this. But I also think that the draft pick element to this comes into play. And also, if Michael Conforto wants to come back to the Mets on a 1-year deal to reset his value, and because he also could be comfortable heading into a Mets camp with a really short, window here between the lockout and spring training, he can stay comfortable, play a year that hit free agency. That is a scenario that really does lean in Conforto's favor, where I understand why he would like to do that, but I don't know if that is the best long-term decision for the Mets, because you would be forfeiting a draft pick that you are set to get through this comp pick that could be part of your organization for years to come for 1 year of Conforto. What really entices me instead is the idea of just signing Conforto to the long-term contract, because I believe you could maybe get him cheaper now than you would potentially get Brandon Nimmo if he has a healthy season next year. And I would rather have Conforto long term than Brandon Nimmo. But what we're going to do in the next segment here is I want to focus first on the reasons why this isn't going to happen, why the Mets should just let Michael Conforto walk, as we've been discussing this whole offseason. And then we'll close the show talking about why this makes perfect sense and the Mets should try to retain Michael Conforto and sign him to a long-term deal now. But before we get into that, I want to tell you a little story about how my day started. I don't know if this ever happens to you, but I was heading out to the grocery store. I'm going through my list in my mind. I'm going to run in and out really quick. I'm just thinking, I'm not really paying attention. I'm pulling out of the garage, and what happens? I leave my right side mirror in the garage. I crash that thing, you hear a big pop, and I'm thinking, oh no, how much is this going to cost me? But then I remembered that I could just go to rockauto.com. So instead of going to a chain store or a new car dealership where they would have taken forever and looked up the few models of my mirror that they could carry, and they would have tried to gouge me on the price where I would have paid 30%, 50%, maybe even 100% more. I just went to Rock Auto, put in my 2010 Toyota Corolla. Come on, I'm not trying to get anything fancy here, right? This car has 175,000 miles on it. I just need something that I can see out of. Got a nice $25 mirror, $9 shipping, bing, bang, boom. I'll look up a video on YouTube, figure out how to install that bad boy, and I will save a ton of money by going to Rock Auto. That is why you should go there for all of your auto parts needs. It is a family business that has been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer. You can explore their easy-to-use website like I did and find the solution to your auto parts needs. When you go to rockauto.com, make sure you find the How to Hear About Us box and tell them that Locked On sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Now, this is also the time of year where in the past I might have given up on my resolution to stay healthy, but Built Bar makes it so much easier to stick to that resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. These are protein bars that taste like candy bars, especially their new protein-infused marshmallows, the puffs. These are delicious. They have the cinnamon churro, the coconut marshmallow, the banana cream pie. If you're talking about the regular Built Bar flavors, whether it's mint brownie, coconut almond, or their new white chocolate cookies and cream. They're all delicious. They have new flavors coming out all the time at built.com. So make sure you check the site often to see what's new. And if you want to try Built Bar today, go to built.com and use the promo code LOCK15. You're going to get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. Ever since the New York Mets hired Billy Epler, the plan has been laid out in front of us of what he was trying to do to rebuild this team. In the short term, it's all about free agency and staying away from the trade market because in the long term, he wants to build out the depth of that farm system. To do that, you want to avoid signing players who are attached to qualifying offers. Michael Conforto doesn't necessarily fit that billing because he's the Mets free agent, so you're not giving up the 14th pick in the draft like you would if you were to sign, say, a Trevor Story or a Carlos Correa. But instead, you're talking about not receiving that Comp B or Comp A selection, depending on where Conforto signs and for how much money. It's not as significant to not get that pick. It's a pick that wasn't always entitled to. If you had signed the qualifying offer, you wouldn't have gotten the pick anyway. So you can make an argument that even if Conforto wants a 1-year deal with the Mets, that would be, of the same value of the pick that you're giving up. Because it's Steve Cohen, because you can sign other free agents, though, and you can go out and get, say, a Suzuki or Chris Bryant, there is still that idea that maybe the Mets should just let him walk and, look at other free agents and other ways to improve the team. So I really, if I had to think completely with my brain here, don't believe it's going to happen because of that. Because I really do think that this team values that draft pick. And I also don't know if the two sides this offseason would be able to come to terms on a long term deal, which is the only way it makes sense, in my opinion. With that said, though, the other factor that you have to look at is what exactly do the Mets have to do right now? You know, Signing Michael Conforto, we're going to talk about that in a minute, would be a great addition to help you win in 2022. Just bring in good players. That's the bottom line. But what's the priority right now? And we've talked about it over the last couple of weeks, if not months here. It's adding pitching. The Mets still have to replace Aaron Loop. They still have to address that starting rotation. I even look at the infield as almost a bigger area of need than the outfield. If you look at the outfield right now, yes, Dominic Smith is technically your fourth outfielder. That's not great. But if the Mets were to clear some roster spots, if they were to trade JD Davis and open the door for a Nick Plummer or a Khalil Lee to make that roster coming out of spring training. Then I look at the outfield depth on the big league roster and I really like it. Also, even if, one of those guys doesn't make it, you're just talking about the upper level depth, the starting depth that you have with Canna, Marte, and Nimmo, and you're set right now. I mean, this is a team that has already improved their outfield significantly. Not to mention the fact and let's just say Robinson Cano turns back time and is a starting second baseman for the Mets, and Nimmo goes down with an injury. You can always put Jeff McNeil back in the outfield. So they have a lot of flexibility right now. They have a team that when it comes to the position players, I'm really not concerned. I do think it would be great to trade a JD Davis. I've said it on this show. I said it a second ago. I've said it a million times before that on this show. I just want that door open for Mark Vientos to potentially get some at bats or get a lot of at bats as the DH this season, because I think that is maybe the highest ceiling option that exists on the roster. But talking about signing Michael Conforto, that is going to raise the floor of this team significantly. It just is. He is the type of power hitter that can really drive in a ton of runs, especially with the on base guys the Mets have right now. I like the team a lot better with Mark Canna and, some combination of Cano and Dominic Smith getting some DH at bats, being able to really keep everyone fresh throughout the season. Then I like the team with the JD Davis in that same role. You know what I'm saying? So because of that, I think there is some merit here. But really, what it comes down to is the Nimmo Conforto conversation long term. That's what I think is the interesting element to this. Because if you look on paper, just based on the stats, when these guys are on the field, Brandon Nimmo's a better player than Michael Conforto. He just has been. They're different. For Nimmo, he's an on-base machine. For Conforto, there's more pop there. But Brandon Nimmo, for his career, has gotten on base at close to a 400 clip. So that is immense value. Pair that with his improving defense. He had a really good season down center field. And maybe he is the smarter bet long term. I've talked about signing Nimmo to a contract extension. The thing is, in the same span from 2016 on, Michael Conforto has played nearly 250 games more than Brandon Nimmo. And as they say, the best ability is availability. And Michael Conforto is going to be available for you more long term, I believe, than Brandon Nimmo. And because of that, it actually makes a lot of sense to sign Conforto now and let Nimmo walk next season. That's what I want to talk about more in just a minute. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where the next fire coach is going to land, betonline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, so as I said, if you look at the stats since 2016, Brandon Nimmo has been a better player than Michael Conforto. And the main one I look at here is WRC plus, which is weighted runs created plus, measuring hitters based on a league average of 100. Since 2016, Brandon Nimmo's WRC plus is 134. Michael Conforto's is 124. So that tells us that Brandon Nimmo has been 10% better than Conforto. You go to their slash lines, Conforto a 254 hitter, Nimmo 266, but on base percentage leans heavily towards Nimmo at 393 compared to 358. Slugging percentage, Conforto has an edge at 466 compared to 445. The strikeout and walk rates are actually pretty similar. Obviously, Nimmo walks a tad more. But then you go to F4, and this is the interesting one. Michael Conforto's F4 since 2016 is an even 15. Brandon Nimmo's is 12.2. That's a difference of 2.8 wins. But when you weigh in the fact that, Conforto has played nearly 250 games more than Nimmo, it just shows you that when he's on the field, Brandon Nimmo is more valuable. That's the big, question mark there. That's the big if. Can he stay healthy? Because you look at Conforto's career, there's been two injuries, really, right? You got the shoulder injury in 2017 that cost him the end of the season, and the hamstring injury this past year, which cost him the beginning of his season. But that's two injuries, and we can say we're at the top of our head. With Brandon Nimmo, it's been a neck, it's been a back, it's been a hand. It's been a million different injuries, of course, over the course of his career. He's only played 100 games once in his entire career, 6 years, only eclipsed 100 games that one time. You also look at the fact that, based on some of these advanced numbers, if Conforto's healthy this year and he hits the open market as a center fielder, he might get a bigger contract than Conforto. That's where this gets really interesting. And you look at, the future for these two guys, and you think, well, Conforto's been around a little bit longer. Maybe Nimmo's future is brighter. They're only separated in age by 26 days, both March birthdays. Okay. They both turn 29 this upcoming March. So you look at that, and really, you should be comparing these guys as players at a very similar point in their career. And because of Conforto's durability, I think that his next 5, 6 seasons are going to be more valuable than Brandon Nimmo's, just like his last 5 or 6 seasons were, simply because he's going to be on the field more. And when you're talking about which one you sign long term, that's important. And, I just did the whole show yesterday talking about Mets that can spend their entire career with one franchise. Michael Conforto, it's not too late here. It would be a great story to sign Conforto to a 6-year deal this offseason. It really would be. And I think that he fits this team long term a little better than Brandon Nimmo, because Starling Marte has a lot of the same skills that Brandon Nimmo does. They kind of bring the same thing to the table. Now, you can always have a really good defensive outfielder who is going to get on base at a near 400 clip. Like, you can't have too many of those guys. But at the same time, Starling Marte has never hit 25 home runs in a season. Career high is 23. Brandon Nimmo's not a home run threat either. And if you combine Nimmo and Marte's home run totals since 2016, you get 124 home runs. Starling Marte accounts for 77 of those home runs. Michael Conforto has 123 himself. He is a significantly better power threat than either of those guys, and particularly Nimmo. And so we're talking about fit here. I actually think Michael Conforto fits next to Starling Marte more than Brandon Nimmo does. You also look defensively, and recently there was the report, as I already said, Conforto wants to play center. That is clearly about free agency a little bit, but also because he got comfortable out there. And really, I've talked about it since the Marte signing. I think that is the proper outfield alignment because Nimmo doesn't have the arm for right. Starling Marte does, and maybe Marte can age more gracefully in right field anyway. Still, Marte's a center fielder. That's been his position. So, if you were to sign Michael Conforto with that big arm he has, with the ability to play right field at Citi Field, he's very comfortable out there. I mean, that outfield gets so much better, and really, that would push Nimmo into left, which is his best position. He might not like it for his free agency, but if you're trying to win, an outfield alignment of Nimmo and left, Marte in center, and Conforto and right, it's a damn good outfield, especially with Mark Canha being able to spare those guys. You have another plus defender as your fourth outfielder who's also a plus bat that'll be getting a lot of time at DH. It makes a lot of sense for 2022. And beyond that, again, because of the injury concerns, I think it makes a lot of sense to prioritize Conforto now as opposed to Brandon Nimmo next offseason. And if the comp pick is still in play in the new CBA, if they're still doing that in some capacity where teams will get some benefit from a player turning down a qualifying offer, well, you can just get the same pick that you're about to get for Conforto for Nimmo next year. So even in that sense, the long-term implications, it does, pay more service to this idea that Conforto coming back to the Mets would be a good thing here. If you told me right now, which free agent could the Mets have? Chris Bryant, Trevor Story, Seiya Suzuki. I don't even know who else I should throw into this mix. Of all those names you could put out there, even a Kyle Schwarber or Nick Castellanos, I guess would be the other ones, right? The big bats that can beat DHs. Michael Conforto's the best player, in my opinion, or the best fit. Yeah, I know everyone loves Chris Bryant. If you've been listening to this show or watching this show for any period of time this offseason, you know he's not my favorite player in this class. And it's not for the 2022 season. For 2022, Bryant would be great. It's the fact that you're going to have to give him a long-term deal, and I don't like how he's going to age after the defensive season he just put up, where he was one of the worst defenders in baseball. Obviously, the versatility is great, but when he's not playing a good third base or a good outfield, how much does that versatility really help you, right? Castellanos and Schwarber, defensively, they're not giving you anything. Trevor Story, you got to give up the real pick that you'd be nervous about, the 14th overall pick. Way more valuable than the pick you give up for Michael Conforto. So because of that, Conforto is, a starting level player you could sign right now, who could hit 30 bombs for you and even be an all-star in his best season. I think for him, he would welcome a return. It was clear he was emotional about having to leave. So this could be an opportunity for him to come back for the purposes of this shortened period here where, you have to go through these labor negotiations that he's probably a part of in some capacity. Conforto is. And then if you sign with another team, now you got to move. Now you got a million things you have to do in a shortened window as they try to get the season to start on a normal time. It's a lot to ask. So I think for him, signing with the Mets makes a ton of sense if he gets the contract he desires. Again, if it's a 1-year deal, I don't love it as much, although I could easily be talked into that, right? Because you're trying to win now, and it just helps you so much for this season because, there is no counting on Brandon Nimmo to play 100 games. So you hope so. You hope next year's final year he stays healthy, but we've been saying that the last couple of seasons, and it just hasn't come to fruition. So because of those injury concerns, because of my affinity for Michael Conforto in general, I've talked myself back into this thing. I think it makes a lot of sense for their future. I think, you have Canha on the books for 2023. So if Nimmo walks, your 2023 outfield would be set in stone there. And then beyond that, it would be Starling Marte and Michael Conforto out there as your main building blocks in the outfield. I think Conforto can be had on a reasonable contract. It'd be less than what you gave Marte, I would imagine. So under that context, again, it just fits. It really does. And it would be a move so different from the Wilpon era that I love it that much more, because that would be Steve Cohen understanding the value that a player like Conforto has for this franchise, a fan favorite, a player that can do a lot for this team. And, it would show the Mets having a different character to not just burn bridges with their former players as soon as they're ready to get paid. And that's what it felt like so many times in the past under the Wilpon regime. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. On tomorrow's show, by popular request, we'll be doing the 5 best trades in Mets history. Then on Friday, for a farm report, we will continue going through our top 20 prospect list, and we'll be doing 10 through 6. So some great shows to close out the week. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q and handicap expert Lee Sterling. Get daily picks, blowout specials, wrong team, favorite picks, and Lee Sterling's lock of the day by following Locked On Bets wherever you get podcasts.